Hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Robledo and this is Tu Voz. In previous episodes, we spoke about Latinas and Marianismo with Talia, who's from Panama, Bella, whose family is originally from Mexico but has been in the U.S. for generations, and Abril, who's first-generation Mexican-American. These women were brought together to discuss their experience with gender roles and how Latinas use their voice to resist gender cultural expectations and double standards within their families. In this episode, we will continue to explore the question, but focus on Latinos and their relationship with machismo and caballerismo. To answer the question from this perspective, I interviewed three Latinos: Jose Flores.
My dad is Mexican and my mom's Puerto Rican, so there's like two different cultures in the household.
Joshua Ysasi, who is biracial, Mexican on his dad's side and white on his mom's side. Gonzalo Robles.
I am originally from Honduras and I consider myself a Latino.
Three Latinos from not only different backgrounds but different stages in their life as well. Before we get to the interviews, let's define machismo and caballerismo. In previous episodes, we defined machismo as it's defined in the Michigan Daily article Machismo Culture Must Go by Hugo Quintana, a strong or exaggerated sense of manliness. Caballerismo is the opposite, according to the definition used in the textbook Introduction to Women and Gender Studies, an interdisciplinary approach, which defines caballerismo as a word derived from the Spanish word caballero and has come to signify a Spanish gentleman with proper, respectful manners living by an ethical code of chivalry. Jose, Joshua, and Gonzalo have all experienced or witnessed machismo but strive for and encourage caballerismo. Jose is the youngest of three with two brothers and one sister. There were expectations set on him since his family didn't want him to repeat their same mistakes.
Expected a lot for me, like to be the man of the house, me be the one to make it and take care of the family.
These expectations reflect the actions of his father as the youngest son in his family as well.
The role my dad took, being the youngest male, also was kind of tough for him. Just the fact that he brought all his family with him, and so basically my dad was the one that kind of like made it and like had the good job here in the United States and like try his best to like take care of his family out here. So it was like they expected me to do the same.
While Jose was expected to be the man of the house, his sister was expected to be the woman of the house. Expectations that fall under the term Marianismo.
I would say for my sister, it was mostly like she would kind of be like the woman in the house, like she'll clean and stuff like that, take care of me, because a lot of times both of my parents weren't home because they were working. So my sister would be like my basically babysitter and like take care of me. Now we have like a running, like we have a joke between us. Like I say that my mom's not my mom, my mom's my sister, just because I saw more of my mom. But it's nothing against my mom because obviously she was working. Like I love my mom. It was just like she just couldn't be there.
Despite both having expectations related to taking care of their family, they had different rules.
It's something me and my sister talk about all the time, just because she says that I'm like lucky and stuff like that, just because my mom was 10 times more tough on her, just for the fact that she was a female and like she couldn't be out at night. Like, but me, it would have been like they would freak out, but it wouldn't be like, oh, where were you? Like I was worried and stuff like that. It wouldn't be like them cussing at me and telling me I'm grounded. It would just be like, I was worried for you. Like you should have told me where you're at.
Joshua also acknowledges this with his sisters and cousins growing up.
The guys, we tended to have a little bit of a longer leash as far as independence and freedom, whether it was like hanging out with friends or geographically being able to be away from the house, versus like my sister or my cousins, or if they were going to do something, they had to be with one of us, whether it was my sister hanging out with my brother and I, or my female cousins hanging out with her male cousins, when I was up here.
For Jose, this difference in how him and his sister were raised wasn't noticed until she brought it up to her family when she was older.
Yeah, I didn't realize until my sister kind of like brought it out. I did see it and it kind of opened my eyes, think maybe for future reference.
Joshua saw the traditional gender roles growing up with both sides of his family, and that was the norm to him.
The perception, I guess, of relationships between men and women, I think was relatively like American traditional for the time. Granted, this is like late 90s, early 2000s, right? To where there is a certain level of dad comes home, food's ready, house is clean, and I really witnessed that expectation, from growing up with my mom, where like she was working a full-time job, taking care of the three of us, because I have a brother and a sister from that marriage as well. And she was going to night school, and the expectation was still keep the house clean and whatever, and I call my stepdad my dad. He raised me, you know what I mean? So I'm just, it might get a little confusing, but he would come home, you know, and just be like, all right, I'm tired. I'm ready to decompress. And then it wasn't until I was an adult looking back that I was like, my mom was tired, you know, why didn't she get to decompress, you know? But so that's kind of the relationship that I saw was kind of those traditional gendered norms, you know? And then again, you know, when I was spending time with my biological father, my dad, and my grandmother, those norms were still there. You know, like my grandmother doted on my dad and her husband, my grandfather, like hand and foot, just always like in service to them, you know, and, you know, it came from love, but then, you know, you still see that it's like the societal norm, you know, is the female taking care of the males of the family. And so I saw that on both sides, and it seemed really normal, like not even questioning it, you know, because you don't get the lens until you get older.
He didn't begin to question this until he was older when he started dating.
I started recognizing or thinking about it until I was like a teenager or young adult, you know, like 17, 18, 19, that range, you know, and it was really when I started like seriously dating, you know, because like when you're in high school and stuff, you know, you have different relationships, but it's still kind of not as mature as I guess you would associate it with kind of the later years of your teens. So it really wasn't until you start seeing those serious relationships start sprouting up to where it's like, how are you supposed to be quote unquote the man in a relationship, or what do you expect out of that? And I never felt like really comfortable expecting like to be like waited on hand and foot. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that really came from my mom, who like made sure we knew how to do our own laundry. We knew how to cook. We knew how to like take care of ourselves essentially, because she was like, you know, you don't need to rely on a female to take care of this stuff. You have to be able to take care of yourself. But I saw her doing that for my stepdad, you know what I mean? And I saw my grandmother doing that for her husband and for my dad, you know what I mean? And so it was just kind of like question marks, kind of like, what's the expectation here? What am I supposed to do? You know?
Gonzalo, on the other hand, didn't experience these same traditional gender roles within his family.
But I can tell you just from my own personal experience that I grew up in a household where my mom was an amazing, and still is at 88 years old, and a strong female. She doesn't let anybody tell her what to do. I remember back early 60s, my mom, or later in the 60s, my mom would travel to the States without my father, and he would encourage her to travel all over the world on her own. So, you know what I saw from my father? I saw a strong male too, because he was a leader in our community, but also he gave the respect to my mom and the independence. What I learned is that to be successful, you have to have a successful partner. And I didn't see my dad on top of my mom, or my mom. It was a partnership. And to this day, even my sisters that I have, they are strong females. So when we are all around together, all of us have that trait from both of my parents. So to me, it was great. I did observe that in my with other families where I come from, and I still, observe that, especially with the families I work with.
Despite not personally experiencing the machista ideals or enforcement of Marianismo, Gonzalo still saw it as director and founder of Café con Leche, an organization that works with Latine parents and students to promote post-secondary education for all students.
What I have seen is that usually the father is the one who leads, and not in all of them. Sometimes, especially when it comes to education, and if they come from places that most of our families come here to work, and that is what they believe, and they take pride, and they don't see education as important, some of them. So especially with the young ladies, they don't encourage them, or they don't motivate them to continue. They say, well, that's fine, but what about work or anything like that? And instead of validating their beliefs, validating their dreams. So what I try to do is just be a role model, even especially for the fathers, that sometimes we have a conversation, and of course with a lot of respect, right? Because I have to understand that that's their culture. That doesn't mean that I am right. That doesn't mean that they are wrong. So all I'm saying to me when I engage with the fathers is here they have all these opportunities. Think about what they can do for the future and bring to the family. And I understand where you're coming from, but let's look at it from a different perspective. And instead of confronting, I try to have a dialogue with them. But absolutely, I see it and it's embedded and it's something that hopefully we can change. But it's also, I know that it's part of the Latino culture.
Jose also acknowledges this as part of the Latina community.
I would say it's a big part just because of the fact that a lot of these Hispanic males have to step up in the plate because a lot of times they come from like very low income families and stuff like that. So they have to step up and like be tough and be mentally tough and stuff like that. But they've taken mentally tough like idea maybe way too far to where now it's like bad for them basically. So I get the fact. I talked to some of them, like I had some very machismo like friends and stuff like that, and they like, I just have to be tough because the world don't love me and stuff like that, and nobody cares about crying. I'm like, no, there's people that could care and stuff like that, but it's the idea that you were taught that you have to do it for yourself and you have to do it for your family, when in reality there's actually people out there that might care about you more than you think, but we're taught to not let nobody get in our way to make it. But it just got to where I guess it got toxic and like actually hurt us thinking that way.
These gender roles and the idea of the macho man continue to exist because that's what previous generations have been teaching.
And it's going to be like, well, the male can't. He doesn't know how to. He wasn't taught that because most likely his dad didn't do it. His dad probably was like a very machismo. So, he just thought that's the way to be a man.
It's a break in the cycle of machismo and marianismo that can be the cause of change. Joshua saw this break with both sides of his family.
In relation to like my dad and my grandmother, she got sick when I was a teenager as well. You know what I mean? And seeing that my grandfather got sick first, and he always wanted to keep, her in the room and in bed, right? So he was like really controlling her in that aspect. And part of that was mental health, mental illness. And that theoretically contributed to like her health downward spiral because she wasn't taking care of herself or doing things that would benefit her. She was trying to make him appeased and happy kind of in that point. But, she had some strokes and whatnot, and basically was unable to take care of herself anymore. And so then my dad took on that caregiver role. So as I'm coming into my late teens, I'm seeing, when I'm visiting my dad, I'm seeing him take on the house cleaning. I'm seeing him take on really just doting on her and taking care of her the way he was taken care of. And I guess that becoming the norm of what I witnessed, in addition to, as I was getting into my later teens, my mom kind of standing up. I don't say like standing up for herself because it feels like negative, but just kind of asserting or maybe fighting for more housework equality and at home. Not always working, but at least seeing her stand up for herself in that regard really just kind of, I think, allowed me to be open-minded and see that there's a different way to do it.
Jose also saw a break of this cycle from his father towards the end of his life as he started to express his feelings and be more affectionate.
My dad's death was unexpected, so I wasn't really expecting. Nobody was expecting it. Like, it just came out of nowhere. But I guess the last couple months he was more like, I love you and stuff like that. And it was weird. Like, at first it was weird. I was like, why? Like, we never say that to each other. And then he was like, I'm just saying I love you because I hated that I haven't said it, and I don't want to like hate myself if I never say it. So the last couple of months he was like hugging me more, saying I love you more out of nowhere. So it kind of like, it was like a very like eye-opening, like if he can change, then obviously he's trying to change to make sure that I'm not the same way as he is. So it just kind of like, it stuck with me, and I'm still trying to like learn,
Gonzalo knows that the Latina community has had Latinos not express their feelings, but he encourages them to do so otherwise.
We grew up in a society where most Latino males are told not to cry, not to express themselves, because that's a sign of weakness, right? And we need to change that mindset that it's okay. Like, sometimes I get emotional with my students. I'm an emotional individual. I'm extremely passionate, and then I tell them, don't take this as a weakness. This is my passion. But when it's come time, I can also speak. So I think that most adult Latino males, that if they feel comfortable sharing with the young generation, they should do that in that way. That is okay. There is nothing wrong with expressing your emotions in a positive way. But it's gonna take time, you know.
Thank you for listening. Join me next time when Jose, Joshua, and Gonzalo come together to speak more about the gender expectations within the Latinx community. I'm Stephanie Robledo, and this was Tu Voz.